Hi everyone, I am reading Blind Magic, the Sanctuary Chronicles, Book 2 by India Kells, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Sarah couldn't sleep, her burning eyes pulling her once more from slumber. She hated when it happened because it not only made her restless, but it meant that more of her already impaired vision was lost. She dreaded the moment she would become completely blind. Her friends may have thought that it was some sort of unknown curse, a witch illness, but she knew the truth. For a little more than 2 years, she had stumbled upon her answers, and her future was bleak. She was still deciding if it was something she wanted for herself, or not. Thoughts often swirled in her mind, weighing her options. Pushing her duvet aside, she grabbed her thick glasses and moved to the window. As her head pounded like someone was ringing bells, she realized that there no way she could fall asleep again. Adding force to her lenses, through a spell she knew well, Sarah perched them on her nose and blinked at the forest blanketed by moonlight through her window. The sanctuary was a beautiful place. A thick protecting magic surrounding the domain, offering a soothing effect. It was like being home, even if it was the very first time you discovered it. She should be tired, with the last week being the most magically draining of her life, but instead, her brain was alight with fireworks, trying to process everything, impatient to return to her beloved books, to learn even more. There was so much information to process, especially about were-dragons. Since one of her best friends had become one, Sarah had decided to dig even deeper into the world of shifters. She had met some of them before, but never on the scale such as those at the sanctuary. For a witch who felt that learning was like a drug, they were fascinating creatures, the embodiment of nature and magic in perfect harmony. Nothing had to be twisted, it only flowed and lived. Unsure what to do and knowing that the sun wouldn't be up for a couple more hours, Sarah dressed, not bothering about her hair, and grabbed her notepad before going downstairs. She figured the kitchen would be empty at this time, and she would make herself a cup of tea before scribbling notes. There were so many things she wanted to check, so many avenues to research. Focusing on a fascinating topic that would also help her friend Valeria was also she needed to forget about her own predicament. The house was big and a real maze of corridors, but Sarah was pretty sure that by going downstairs she would eventually find the place she was searching for. Around the corner, she remembered one of the carvings on the wall as being close to the kitchen, but when her bare feet caught on the carpet, she lost her balance. No sound came from her, but she saw herself falling in slow motion and mentally rolled her eyes at her clumsiness. Why couldn't she place one foot in front of the other without making a fool of herself? And, as she expected, she tumbled to the floor, her notebook flying away and her glasses sliding goodness nowhere. Assessing her body, it seemed that everything was unharmed, apart from a scratch or two. At least there was a blessing in falling down so often. Her body didn't bruise easily anymore. The next point of order, finding her glasses. On all fours, she tried to remember the sound they made when they fell so she could locate them, but her hand only felt the carpet or cool wooden floor until she touched a foot. A foot? Although she knew she was in a safe place, a guest within a sanctuary, the accidental contact made her jump and fall back on her bottom. In addition to the surprising contact, not being able to see rendered her vulnerable, and the tall dark shadow she saw towering above her didn't do anything to calm her thudding heart until it spoke. "Sarah, are you all right?" Ian. Realizing that Asher's beta and right-hand man, or wolf, was the shadow, calmed her nerves a bit. The dark-haired werewolf had been nothing but kind and friendly since she had met him before the first time at Impossibilities, Inc., the store where she worked. There was no reason to fear him. "Ian, good evening. Well, I assume it's getting closer to dawn, so good morning." She couldn't see him, but he must have smiled as she could hear it in his voice. "Can I help you with something?" "Don't move," and she scrambled back on her knees, cautious of where she touched the floor. "Okay, but if you tell me what you're doing or searching for, I could help you. Unless it's some kind of witch spell?" Sarah sighed. "It's dark. I doubt you would be able to find it." I see well in darkness. Not as well as I do in the day, but, for example, I can see your notebook on the floor to your left. Sarah sat back on her ankles, wonder in her voice. Really? More like thermal reading, or perhaps like what the human soldiers are using? I wouldn't know. What are you searching for on the floor, Sarah? She groaned, frustration starting to get hold of her. My damn glasses. When I fell on my face, they flew away. Sarah heard more than saw Ian shift, moving to her right. His shadowy figure bent and took something off the floor before coming back to her, crouching to her level. Got him. Sarah smiled, glancing up to where she assumed his face was. Ian ignored her outstretched hand and gently put the frame back on her face. And now was the dark wolf. He was a dark wolf with clear caramel eyes that currently appeared black with only faint light filtering through the kitchen windows. He was dressed in a pair of jeans and Henley but no shoes, so close she could actually see his face. Beautiful, chiseled with a little black stubble that made him appear fiercer. Did it feel like human stubble or fur? When she extended her hand to touch him, not even realizing she had moved, his sudden intake of air stopped her. I'm sorry, Ian, that was rude of me. Unmoving, he arched an eyebrow, questioning. Rude? I was about to touch you without asking. I'm sorry. And I've put you in an awkward position. A smile tugged at his mouth, and her eyes were fascinated. She found shifters interesting as subjects, but Ian intrigued her on another level. I can't think of any awkward position you could place me in, Sarah. Was he mocking her? It was hard to know with part of his face in darkness. Was he allowing her to touch him? Curiosity and fascination won as she lifted her hand once more and ran her fingertips over his cheek. Soft. And when she cupped his jaw, he slightly nuzzled her palm, her eyes darting to his. His expression was implacable, but his gaze intense. Sarah didn't know what to do, and was tempted to touch his hair too, but some sense returned to her. I just wondered if your beard and your hair felt like human hair or fur. I know it's stupid, but it's not stupid. His voice was slow but soft. You're a researcher. It's okay to be curious. A researcher? Somehow, it flattered her to be called that. Ian nodded. From the start, it was evident. And it's because of your knowledge in your brain that you could help stop a great disaster. You're far from stupid. Ask me anything you want. Sarah smiled but couldn't detach her gaze from his entranced. That was when he moved, lifting his hand to replace a strand of knotted blonde hair behind her ear. His touch lingered, scrambling her brain cells. Ask me, Sarah. She blinked and blurted out her question before she could censor herself. I want to see you as a wolf. Ian seemed to hesitate, and she winced. Of course. I know what a wolf is, and I've seen you as a wolf during the battle with Soren and the Enforcers, here as you defended Sanctuary, but never up close. Does it hurt when you change? Can you think like a man, or is it the wolf that takes over? Can you understand when people speak? Sarah halted when Ian started to laugh, a deep rumbling full of glee. Why was he laughing? Was he mocking her? She must have made a face because Ian stopped and shook his head. Sorry, Sarah, you surprised me with your curiosity, that's all. But before I answer all of your questions, I can satisfy your first one. Moonlight still filtered through the windows as dawn pushed, shedding a silvery glow over them. Under this light, his black hair looked like silk. Ian stood slowly and to her surprise started undressing. She turned to her head. What are you doing? If I turn with my clothes on, I'll ruin them. You need to be naked? As a wolf, I'm naked. If you want to see me change into my beast, you better look at me, Sarah. She bit her lips and hated acting so prudish. It wasn't as if she hadn't seen a naked male body before, but this time it was Ian. Slowly, she turned to him, zeroing in on his face. The cad was smiling, and she couldn't help but smile back. The body before her was breathtaking, but it felt wrong to take advantage of him. Before she could indulge herself, his figure blurred, and she saw his body changing, a mix of magic, energy, and transformation. Fascinated, she inched forward, and a few seconds later, a huge, magnificent black wolf stood before her. All air whooshed from her lungs. Wow. Oh, wow. His eyes glinted like hard amber, looking at her with the same intensity as Ian. It was Ian. On her hands and knees, she patted forward. "You are incredible, Ian. Do you hear me?" He didn't answer and instead lay down sniffing. She extended her hand and hesitated once more. Could she touch him? But before she could overthink it, Ian pushed his head into her hand. Amazed, she stroked the thick fur over his hair and neck, almost forgetting that a man was within the beast. Moved, she sat back, unable to detach her gaze from him. "You can't imagine how much I would like to turn into a wolf." Immediately she bit her lip, revealing too much. "Thank you, Ian. It was an honor to see you like this. You can't imagine the privilege it was for me." Gracefully getting to his feet, the wolf transformed once more, and Ian was kneeling in front of her, magnificently naked, tattoos rippling over his muscled body. Swallowing hard, Sarah was about to repeat the words she had said to him when Ian leaned forward and kissed her. The contact surprised her, but heat coursed through her veins, and she surprised herself by slightly parting her lips, feeling his gasp of surprise. His caramel eyes turned feral and overcome. Sarah closed hers. It was wrong. She couldn't let herself go with any man, any lover. Her own future was doomed, and she cursed the fates for sending her a male who dared to make her feel alive again. Ian cupped her cheek, and Sarah dared to look at him again. When she realized she couldn't see. What she feared the most happened. All of a sudden, she had gone completely blind. Chapter 1. Sarah cursed as her little toe hit the corner of the coffee table. Again, hopping around, pain radiating through her foot, she managed to find the sofa and was confident enough of its position before she let herself fall onto it. Being blind sucked, and it was even worse when you had been using your eyes for so long before. She might have prepared herself for her whole life for that fate, but when her vision started to fade, the reality of it was a nightmare. Massaging her toes, she wiggled it a little and found she had been lucky not to break it. Even though she had memorized her little apartment by heart, as well as the surrounding streets, sometimes her mind wandered and she lost track of her location. Sarah laid down on the sofa and sighed. Images still whirled in her mind, and one that kept on making an appearance was Ian. The dark, wounded werewolf was haunting her, his wild, fiery eyes, the ink swirling over his well-defined muscled body, his messy, dark hair. Heat pulled between her thighs as she remembered the man's body and even his wolf form. He was the very last thing she had seen before her world turned back for good. Her chest hurt at the memory. That must have been it. The root of her obsession, she convinced herself, because a witch and a werewolf didn't mix, especially not her. Love, relationships, and sappy sweet endings were out of the question. On the other hand, developing her brain and her magic was what brought her solace, motivation, and purpose. So that was what she should focus on, not a werewolf. Pushing the enticing caramel eyes and tattooed arms back into the darkness of her mind, Sarah forced herself to get back up. She may not be able to see anymore, but it was by choice. Her choice. Because of who she was, the blood flowing through her veins. Cursed blood. She may have decided that becoming blind was a better fate than embracing her destiny, but that didn't mean that her mind couldn't continue to work. She had planned for this life, and she would make the best of it. One step between the sofa and coffee table. One step to the left to protect her bruised toe. 5 steps to the door. Her winter coat was hooked as usual to the right. Her boots underneath. Apartment keys, a few dollar bills, and her cell phone were in her pocket. Outside, the brisk winter pinched her cheek, and instead of seeing deep black, she was surrounded by stark white. It was the weird thing about her curse. It was as if a thick, frosty glass was before her eyes, not allowing her to see, apart from strong light. Under her feet, a few inches of fresh snow cracked. Burying her face in her scarf, she summoned her magic to give her a sense of direction. Where she wanted to go changed position each day and every day, and even with working eyes, it was tricky to find. Impossibilities, Inc. was a specialty store for magical beings, particularly witches, but for Sarah, it had been a home. Layla, the owner, had welcomed Sarah as well as her friends Valeria and Violet, even if deep down the 3 young women were not only witches. In their world, pure, untainted blood was the only thing that mattered. Status, power, politics. Sarah puffed at that thought as she started walking slowly, focusing on the magical thread in her mind, leading the way, her fingers following the outline of the buildings, the dips of the doors, the sound of cars passing by. Soon after her ordeal, People around her suggested she use a blind cane, but her magic and instinct were all she needed.